Ladies and gentlemen, you're tuned into Class Act Radio, and I have an absolute treat, gem, any kind of valuable piece of rock that you could think of. I got that for you. So there's a lot that's been going on in the world when it comes to Black Lives Matter, social injustice, civil rights, and we need to pay attention to people who take initiative when it comes to these things. And I have a well-known brother here in Phoenix by the name of Ramses, who's done so much for the community, but we're going to have this conversation. And man, it is, Rams, I think it's the third time we ran into each other in person since I can remember.
Oh, man.
Fourth?
If you would have never told me that, I would have never realized it because we are so familiar with each other.
Very, very.
I like to think that I've been very supportive of you and your career because you're a very special person to me. I love to see you succeed and thrive. So, but yeah, when you say it like that, it does. Now that I recall it, it's like we've only been in each other's presence a handful of times.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I have that same relationship and understanding with you as well, that when you're really familiar with someone, you forget that you haven't seen them in person. But ultimately, the vibe and the connection is amazing. And more importantly, I do appreciate you so much tremendously for that, brother, 100%. Since I've been in Phoenix for the last on and off 5 years. And so, but just real quick, I mean, for people who are not familiar with Ramses, just maybe they've been under a rock all this time, what would you say in 5 words? How would you describe yourself?
I try to do good.
I try to do good. You know what? That's perfect. That's what we're talking about. I try to do good. Man, I love that. And also, I just want to also kind of set the precedent for, how you and I got acquainted. I remember so I came to college in Arizona back in 2008, 2010. Okay. It's a long story, but I came back to Phoenix in May of 2016. And I remember I was doing research on just different stations in the area and just wanted to connect with talents and just anyone in media on a genuine level. Sure. And I remember I posted something, I think, with a collection of different Black sitcoms. And you had commented on that. Okay. I'm just curious, how did you get to that point to see that post? And
you know what? If I'm honest now, I'm not sure. But I know that generally speaking, I try to stay in touch with, I'll say the people. I could say my people. I could say the city. There's a number of ways to say it, but I just try to keep my ear to the streets. Yeah. But there's a certain, camaraderie that exists between folks that have similar passions. And so, kind of what I was alluding to earlier, if there's something that I see that my colleague, in this case you, is passionate about and posting about, I'll do my best to find a way to support it, even if it's just a like and a quick comment. So, just trying to stay tapped in.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because a lot of people, I think, can relate to where there's people that they admire or people they want to connect with, and sometimes they are a little bit hesitant or intimidated by reaching out or what may have you. And to me, I think you're one of the few people I've met, at least since I've been in the Valley, who I think took that head on. I mean, wasn't, jaded or uncomfortable with connecting with someone, within the same scope. But moving forward from that, people are probably more familiar with you, not only with being on air with 101 The Beat. You shut down tons of parties DJing, and also just the recent headline where you stepped away from your position with 101.1 The Beat. Just to kind of sum up for people who aren't familiar, I mean, what essentially went down when you wanted to step away from them?
So basically what happened is, I'll try to be brief, but it's kind of a lot that goes into it. So I'd worked there for 12 years. I'm very familiar with the management. I worked very closely with them, and for a long time I was part of, management. I was a music director there and very much one of the senior employees there. Mm-hmm. So once we all saw George Floyd's life get snuffed out on camera, I think that it moved a lot of people, and I was just as moved. Right. And so I got out and I got on the streets and I started protesting with everyone else. Like I said, trying to I'm one of the people. I am a person. I'm not some high and mighty person that lives on some cloud somewhere. Right. So, and I got my children and we went out, and then I started to get asked questions like, okay, what is your radio station going to do? Or did your radio station come out? Or what are you guys doing? Right. Like that. And, in addition to that, I'd go home and I would watch, 12 News or whatever. And these guys would be talking about riots and that sort of thing. And I was just there. It was a protest. There was no riots. Nothing broke. Nothing was on fire. I was there with the 5-year-old, and, we're walking around with everyone else. So I didn't think that was fair. And so I sent an email to management and I says, hey, you know what? We probably should do more than just put a black square up on our Instagram. Amazon is putting Black Lives Matter on their website, and, Best Buy is sending out email blasts and so forth. But at this station, it's a little different because we play approximately 70% black artists,
Right.
100% black music. And that's a sweeping statement because there's a lot of like KSLX and all those guys. They play 100% black music. Trust me, that's rock and roll. You know what I mean? I know the history. So
yeah, that's a deeper.
But in terms of like modern day, present day culture, the charge was like, hey, we should probably do a little more. The initial email went unanswered, and I ended up talking to the general manager at the radio station on the phone. So originally, I emailed the owner and the program director. Didn't hit the GM because didn't need to. He wasn't going to make that decision. But when I had the chance to talk to him and find out, like, hey, what's going on? These guys haven't hit me back. To his credit, his name is Paul. Paul was really motivated. He was like, yeah, we should absolutely do this. And I wasn't trying to destroy anybody, so I'll tell the story the way that it happened. Paul's a good man, and so is the owner, and so is the program director. They're all good men. They're not bad people. They're not racist people. They just kind of missed the mark on this one. And the truth is, and I'll say it as many times as I need to, they should have come to me or someone there and asked, hey, can you do a show that here's what we can do as a radio station. Can you head that effort or something like that? But didn't occur that way. I ended up talking to the GM. He says, yeah, it's a great idea. Let's do the show. I'll take this idea into our next staff meeting and talk to the program director and the owner, since they haven't emailed you back, and we'll get the ball rolling on this. So I says, great. Maybe a week after that, I get a call from the program director, and he's like, hey, man, don't call the GM anymore. You'll scare him. You don't want to scare that man. Just talk to me from now on. So I says, okay. So what's the plan? What are we going to do? And he's like, hey, man, there's this other guy here. I want you to work with him. His name is Pokerface. He's a good friend of mine. He's like, why don't you work with him and get the show together? Yeah. So, Poke and I, we, start trying to put the show together. And after some time, Poke says, hey, man, I got a lot going on in my life, and I feel like I might be slowing you down. And if I get out of the way, then you can do this show and, take off with it. And again, this is a quick and dirty version. I'm leaving out a lot of details here. But finally, I took that information back to the program director, and I says, okay, well, it's just me now. I can have a show on the air this weekend. I have a studio in my house. I can record it. We don't have to worry about bringing guests in for COVID or anything like that. We can do this show. And in the meantime, more people are getting shot. We saw what happened in Wisconsin and Kenosha. All these sorts of things. We see people losing their lives. These vigilante sort of folks responding. And on this side of the equation, we have no mass media voice, insofar as I can tell, on the ground level in this city and surrounding cities largely. So, I says, hey, man, I can have a show on the air this weekend. And he says, okay, well, give me another week. And I was like, another week? Why do you need another week? And he's like, well, I want to talk to Pokerface. He's kind of grabbing. And I was like, hey, listen, man, if you don't want to do the show, you can tell me. I have the resources to do it on my own. Just let me know. If it's a weekend overnight slot, 30 minutes. I just need the information. How long do you want it? Do you want music in it? The logistics. I can get the interview scheduled.
Right.
So he's like, no, just give me a week. And I'm like, you could text him. You don't
Yeah.
Why do you need another week after we've been waiting months to do this? I don't know what's going on your end with him. I don't know. No one's talking to me. I'm getting ignored.
Yeah.
So,
and see, that's what bothers me about when people want to take initiative for things that are tied to a social or civil issue. People often move slow to that, and it's like that saying, "No answer is an answer." Right? It's one
absolutely.
thing. I even like to go as far as to say a slow answer is an answer.
Listen, man, Desmond Tutu, what'd he say? if you've chosen neutrality during times of oppression, then you have sided with the oppressor or something like that. Yeah,
that sounds very familiar.
So to conclude, I waited the week despite objecting. I waited the week, and he called me back a week later. He says, you know what, I don't want to do a black show. Just be honest, I'll lay it out right here. I don't want to do a black show. We'll just keep running the PSA shows that we always run. And if you don't know, for those listening, PSAs are for every FM station and AM station that has a license from the FCC. You have to, by law, air some sort of public service, to the city. This is why you hear like don't drink and drive ads or, domestic violence hotlines.
Or even now we hear public service announcements about COVID and washing your hands and social distancing.
That's because radio stations and televisions, they have to make inventory for that. So the station wasn't doing, he was telling me the station wasn't going to do anything other than their minimum obligation as mandated by the FCC. Mind you, this station plays 100% black music across 2 stations they own. So I took issue with that. He tried to explain himself, but there's really no, I was like, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. I pleaded my case umpteen times over however long. And after that, I kind of had to sit with it for a few minutes. It didn't take long. And then I realized that I couldn't work there anymore. I had so many people I had committed to interviewing or giving them a platform. These are people out on the streets with bullhorns, with powerful messages. And a bullhorn will only hit 300-400 people. There's thousands of people in the streets. So not everyone can hear this. And then we need to challenge that narrative that, mass media is putting out there. So, I wrote my resignation because there was no way I was going to be able to go back in the streets and then tell those people, hey, I didn't get to do the show, but I still work there.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I've noticed with navigating the radio industry in particular is I believe radio should be a lens of its listeners.
Sure.
So when listeners call in and have something to say, radio should be a lens to, magnify it or bring some visibility to that.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned that you have gone to protest yourself because if you're playing music to satisfy people and entertain them, it shouldn't be difficult to be in a position to want to educate or inform them as well.
I look at it through a full-on cultural lens, right? I said it best in a second open letter that I wrote, where I says, we don't mind if you eat from our table, just make sure you save us a seat.
Yeah.
Do you understand? In other words, we don't mind if you take our culture, package it, make money off of it, mass produce it, or whatever it is that you're going to do. But when our community is hurting, when we need to move forward, when we need to heal, when we need to establish a new narrative, we need to regroup, revamp, whatever, blaze a new path into the future, we insist, nay, demand that you allow us the space to do that, to establish that amongst ourselves, powered by black voices. I made sure to say that. Right. And that's not to suggest that brown voices are less valuable or white voices are less valuable or anything like that, but as at present, there was really nothing like that. There's no Telemundo.
Right.
There is no, like I mentioned, KSLX or, the Mormon Church owns 92.3.
Right. Yeah.
These sorts of places where, your right wing, whatever it is, there's no place like that, at least not here. And so my charge to these people and all allies, because I do still consider them to be allies. They may not like me personally, but I know that they're not bad people. My charge to them and everyone else is, just be mindful of there needs to be balance. We're not just rappers and singers. We're human beings. We're intellectuals. We should be able to decide what happens with our posterity.
Right. And so when you made that decision to walk away from the station and resign, kind of walk through, I guess, a thought process with that. Did you consult with some other individuals close to you on that, or was it just like a instant knowledge, I'm going to make this decision?
So what happened was, first off, I wrote the letter, and I wrote it as an open letter because, remember, everyone had to see it.
Right.
Because I would be embarrassed to go on the streets and then meet these important, amazing human beings with these powerful messages and tell them I failed and I still work there. That would be a slap in their face. It would be a slap in the face to everybody who wore this beautiful skin that I have on right now. They would roll in their graves, right? I had to do that. I looked at my phone screen because I'm saying, not just saying no to a 15-year career. I'm not saying no to just my friends that I've had for 12 years. I'm saying no to any opportunities in the future because you're not supposed to quit a radio station like that. You know, you're not supposed to blow up the building as you walk out of it, right?
Right.
So I watched my tears roll down my phone screen as I'm typing this letter. And yes, I did call one person, but after it was already written, called one person, and I read it to him. And he said, there's absolutely no way you can write that and not send it. Just do it and you'll be fine. And within 3 hours, I had 2 job offers, you know. So now I'm on plenty of stations now.
Yeah, and
I'm knocking on 10 now, so everything's great. But
and I want to touch up on that in a little bit. And
Sure.
you alluded to something that has resonated with me in my career for a long time when it comes to working in radio, is that if you are going to be an on-air talent or work in any capacity of media, I believe it's not a right, it's a privilege to be in the position we are, to talk about the things we talk about, to bring awareness to the things we bring awareness to, but there's also a sense of responsibility to not only the people that are in our circle, but to the people who listen and consume what we do on a regular basis. Because you can go to a club, you can go to the grocery store, and someone can see you in person, and someone can say, hey, something you did or said made a difference in my life, or other than that.
happens all the time. All the time.
And also, and I remember one of my favorite stories, and this is, I think, one of the main reasons I have a lot of respect for you, is #LunchbagPhoenix. And I saw the video of where there was the individual who was homeless, and essentially, you know, you provided some supplies and some resources to help her and her child, if I remember correctly, her daughter.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And then you took upon that and built on it and said, you know, I don't want this to be a momentary thing. I want this to be a monumental thing. And now you created #LunchbagPhoenix, and this is before, you know, anything going on with Black Lives Matter. And if you can just inform people a little bit more about #LunchbagPhoenix and some of the other things you've done in the community.
Yeah, of course. So, Black Lives Matter was founded in 2012 after Trayvon Martin. So I've been doing #Lunchbag since 2010.
Yeah.
And basically, I took advantage of, you know, my position on the radio station, and shout out to my program director, the guy that told me he didn't want to do a black show.
Right.
He's the guy that gave me the idea to do an outreach in the city. So again, he's not a bad person. He just missed the mark one time. He's forgiven, and I'm sure in the future he will aspire to do better. But I digress. We took the platform and we galvanized the community, me and my friend Q Ward, and all of our volunteer base. There's a ton of us, and forgive me if I haven't named you off, but you know, Q and I were the ones that originally sat down with the idea, and we just decided to ask our friends to come help us out. We went downtown, took a nightclub, and we started feeding some homeless folks. We made lunch bags, and you know, that's been growing and growing ever since. And now this past weekend we fed, I think we did 150 lunches, but we did about 400 hygiene kits, and we did over 500 socks that we gave out. So obviously it's grown. We just partnered with the senior vice president of Def Jam Records. So he's coming in, and he has some really great ideas about how we can continue to champion that and other efforts into the future. So yeah, that's something that I've definitely been working on for a decade now.
And so, because my thing is that I've known and seen your pattern of being involved in the community, working with people on a regular basis, and some people may not be aware of that. That's why I wanted to bring some context to, you know, walking away from the station. But you know, in walking away from the station, and you've now created your own, I like to say, media entity in Civic Cypher.
Sure.
And so, was Civic Cypher something that you have planned for a long time, or the birth of it come from recent events at the station and walking away from it?
So I would say that it really came from recent events and walking away from the station. So obviously there was a loose idea of what it was going to be, but in my head, again, I was going to just create a place where those with powerful messages could come up and share that message.
Right.
30 minutes in the middle of the night. That's all I wanted to do. And what ended up happening was, on the other side of that, that resignation, a lot of my friends in radio reached out to me and they says, hey, I don't know what you were trying to do over there, but whatever that was, can you please do it over here?
Yeah.
And so just logistically, I felt like, well, if I was going to do 30 minutes, maybe I can stretch that to an hour. So the show evolved in that way. I didn't have a name for it. It was just going to be
A community type of
community
show.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
right.
it. So I had to come up with a name, and Dr. Camilla Westenberg helped me out with that. And I had a very strong support system. My family, of course, and a lot of the community came together to really support me, because my resignation letter ended up getting shared so much that a lot of folks came out to help. Rashana helped with a lot of the PR stuff. All the names will escape me right
Yeah.
now, but
Yeah.
it came together, and then now obviously it's a podcast, it's a YouTube channel, it's a
It's a
and it's served to the community, and that's very important, because it's one thing for people to kind of search for information.
right.
It's another thing if you're a broadcasting entity where you send information out to the masses, and you're taking this message and sending it to the masses, to where maybe folks who otherwise would not be able to be made aware of the fact that a show like Civic Cypher exists will happen upon it.
Yeah.
And that's very important as well. And so, I think that I wanted the station to do something like
Yeah.
this. Originally, I didn't even want to do the show. I was happy going out on the streets and protesting. I just felt like the station should do something. Even when I talked to my friend at Power, I was still employed at the Beat at the time. I called the program director at Power. His name is Ben. And I says, hey, man, you guys should really do a show like this. I'm working on doing a show like this at the Beat. You guys should do this too. So there was really no ego. It's not like I wanted to do a show in the
Right.
middle of the night on a weekend for
Right.
30 minutes. I'm not dying to do that. I've done like lots of primetime things, so there was no ego involved. I felt it was necessary, but anybody could have done the show as long as it existed. But now, obviously, I'm the one holding the torch, it looks like. So.
Yeah, and what's really crazy is that from what I'm putting together is that this started off as a small thing that you wanted to put together just from your experience from protesting,
Sure.
and now it's evolved to you being affiliated with 10, you said 9, potentially 10 different digital entities, right? And now we're in this age where
3 FM.
3 FM. Okay, so I stand corrected. So 3 FM entities,
Sure.
A number of other digital entities, online entities. And so with all of this going on, I mean, where do you see the growth?
Well, if I I just recorded my 3rd show, and I have either partnered with or have start dates with, like I said, 10 platforms, 3 broadcast platforms in the city: Power 98, 93.9, and 102.9 are FM, are all broadcasting, and then the rest of them are digital platforms. But if there is an appetite for this type of show, to where it has grown to 10 platforms and 3 episodes, then I
Right.
think that by the time we get to the 10th, the 12th, the 20th, New Mexico's not out of the question, Tucson's not out of the question, Vegas is not out of the question. I have friends that work in these markets. There's a lot of small markets in California, and it's just a matter of asking, hey, would you guys like to carry this show? I'm going to make it. It's supported by the community, so it costs you nothing. You just have to forego running commercials in that hour. And if all you have is a 3 a.m. time slot and Sunday morning, then so
Right.
be it. But I think that it's little stuff like that that helps. First off, it'll keep you on the right side of history.
True.
But also it will. You're bound to reach somebody and inform somebody that may not know what gerrymandering is, or may not know what defund the police means, or these concepts that on their face might be a little jarring, or they get manipulated by mass media or the right media to sound very scary to people. And they're not scary concepts once you break it down. They may not be as practical, they may not be as whatever, but the idea is, if we say this and you say no to it, then maybe we'll meet in the middle, and we've taken a step forward together as brothers and sisters, And so I do think that by having a stage and a platform on this side, specifically one that speaks the language, in a manner of speaking, of hip hop culture, that I think that it can create more cheerleaders for civic duties,
Yeah.
and more people that will champion a black agenda, a decidedly black agenda, so that we all can reach that point where we are living much more harmoniously with each other. It's not to take anything away, just to all share it.
And with sharing, I myself, I'm not a Phoenix native, but I've done my best to become more informed about the history and the culture of Phoenix when it comes to the people who live here. And I know Phoenix has its own history locally with the police. And my question for you is just from your side, what are some examples or stories that you can recall on that's helped you get to the point of making Civic Cypher?
Well, I moved to Phoenix in 1990. I'm
Okay.
from Compton, California. So I'm familiar with the LAPD. I left California when I was 7 years old, but that 7 is plenty of time to get familiar with the LAPD.
Right.
You know, especially being black and in Compton. You know, that's just the part of your daily life. And I never had that experience of like the police are the good guys or the heroes or whatever.
Yeah.
It was always quite the opposite. And you know that I saw these things. You know, I saw the police hurt people. I saw the police. You know, remember when I was little, a policeman took a man that was sitting on the ground outside of his car, and he grabbed his head, and he slammed his head into the car, and it dented the door in. And he was just sitting there. I think he might have been crying or something like that, but his shirt was kind of torn. And the police officer grabbed this man's head, and just slammed it into the car. And the guy wasn't doing it, you know. And so these things very much shaped my view of policing and so forth. So coming to Arizona, I have stories like that happened out on the ground here. I got this place is the only place where I've had a gun pointed at me. I've been pulled out of my car. I remember one time I was going to school, and my cousin was having an asthma attack, and he woke me up and he's like, "Hey, I need to get an inhaler." So I had to go to the bank. This was when I was 19, so it was a while ago. There was no Cash App or anything like that. I didn't have a card or anything. But I went to the bank. I pulled out $20 to go to a Walgreens or something. And when I pulled out of the bank parking lot, I got pulled over, and they pulled me out of my car at gunpoint. You know, and they went in my car and they tore everything, and they threw my backpack on the ground, and all my stuff was everywhere. And they put me in handcuffs. I had to sit in the back of the car, and they grabbed me by the arm. So the handcuffs cut up my wrists. So when I went to school, my wrists were all bloody and brown from scabbing. You know.
Yeah.
And the only thing they told me was that we fit the description of suspicious suspects or something like that. But you know, they let me go. And my cousin, he's like 6'6". I'm 5'7". I'm not a big person. My cousin's huge and very, very brown skin. So that just by itself was very intimidating. They treated him way worse.
Yeah.
He actually got hurt and he couldn't breathe already. So fortunately, we were fine. You know, we made it through. But I was already accustomed to that sort of thing happening. So just those sorts of things that have helped shape this idea that, you know, at a point, you know, if there's some momentum in the universe, then I probably should join the flow and try to help create the world in which, you know, the police are good guys in everyone's book. If they still exist or whatever. So
and you know, it's what scares me is that, you know, so you had that experience, you know, young, and in a lot of cases young black boys and girls have to grow up sooner than they have to because they have experiences like that, and even a lot of times worse. Now I came up with this phrase, and I'm not happy that I came up with it, but I say this to my white friends and colleagues to put things in perspective. I say, when you have children, you will talk to them at 7 about the birds and the bees. But when I have kids, I have to talk to my kids about why we hung from trees.
Ooh, okay.
And it hurts because the experience that you had is very likely to happen to a young black boy or young black girl. So with that, I know you have, you know, your own sons. What are some of the conversations that you've had with your sons, just talking about police encounters, some of the climate of what's going on? Because I can imagine a lot of parents right now listening to this would like some perspective on how do they introduce these things to their kids.
Yeah, I think that at least for black and brown children, and by that too, I include like people of color or any if you're raising a child who belongs to, we'll say, a marginalized group. If you know that your child might be homosexual or something like that, you know, you have to have different conversations because there's going to be a different set of challenges, and you can speak to those as best as you know how. I think that it starts with trying your best to be informed. You know, I have been very fortunate in my life. I've been educated. You know, now I hold a master's degree. You know, and I've been enriched by a lot of minds, not all of which were black minds. You know, and I've gained some perspective. I've traveled the world. I've been to every state. You know, seen this country, of course, and so I think that having a good amount of perspective and just a kind heart and the desire to be a decent human being and to create an equitable world for those who may not have what you have. I'm a man,
Yeah.
right? So my challenge is to try to make the world a little bit more equitable for women. There's no I don't have daughters, you know, but still just being a kind human, that's something I need to not interrupt women when they talk. I need to let them finish. Even if I well within my rights, I understand that women have it very different. And if I'm going to change the narrative, I might have to take some L's sometimes, you know?
You know, and with taking L's, I've had a bit of a realization as well myself in my interaction with women, in that I've grown from a place to where a lady's value is not predicated upon what I think of her.
Sure.
If I find her attractive,
Sure.
if she can do something for me,
Sure.
her identity is based off her ideas, her
Exactly.
perspective, right? And looking beyond that level of like our interactions, right?
Okay.
So with that, what would you say are some, I guess, recommendations for just young black boys, young black men, with bettering those relationships with empowering black women?
I think that you know, the main thing that we're gonna. So for me, there's some people who like to be black, or they think of things black first, woman second.
Yeah.
I think that we're human beings, and by black people, we're the oldest human beings that exist. And so, you know, I wouldn't challenge that argument from anyone else, but I recognize that I'm a human being. You know, it's easier for me to see a human than to see a Asian human. Do you understand? I will see human first, right? So if we approach women as women first, I think that we will have a different approach when it comes to also addressing their blackness.
Right.
You know what I mean? How is it that this one particular woman that I'm dealing with is able to receive information? And if you don't know, then, you know, you study women authors, you know, you just listen to women and you try your best to put together a game plan to where you don't bulldoze over this woman,
Yeah.
to where you know, honor her, you put her in a position to be able to say her piece and her truth, and you have to accept it. You know, it might not sound the way that you might have a little bit more emotions, might be a little less black and white than you prefer, but you have to understand that that is your sister. I'm one of those people that believes that, you know, all men are my brothers and all women are my sisters, even if they don't like me, even if I don't like them. You know, on some level I have to love them. I have a giant tattoo on my arm, and that's a lifelong commitment. You know, whenever I hold a microphone, down my wrist says "I love you" in really big letters, so people can read that. And I think that a lot of people's impulse is to love first, and they're taught to be afraid.
Yeah.
And so I think challenging the fears that you harbor, and then approaching human beings like they're humans first,
Yeah.
and then whatever designation of human being second, I think that you're already taking the right steps in that critical process toward, you know, having a better understanding.
Yeah, and you know, I asked that question because I believe that with everything going on, we need to have better relations, black men, black women, with each other when
Sure.
it comes to addressing these things. Because to be honest, for us to sit down and address whether it's, you know, police brutality and excessive force and accountability, we have to get by some of the things that are keeping us at bay. So with that, I've noticed when people are on the opposite sides of each other, why do you think is it that we are so far separated? Well, is it one person not understanding the other, or are we just not talking the same language?
I think it's both, and probably more things as well. You know, there's 100 reasons why people don't see eye to eye. It could be their lived experience. It could be a lack of information. It could be, you know, maybe they do harbor some genuine hatred. You know. Excuse me. One of the things that I do feel that I see a lot is willful ignorance, where people, in my opinion, people who are Trump fanatics have really kind of are often willfully ignorant.
It's
And
they're
they,
embracing it as a part of their identity.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
And the emboldening of, this hateful, divisive sort of ideology and approach to, dealing with your brothers and sisters. We're still
Yeah.
going to be here. We've been here. We're going to be here. We're still going to be your brothers. We still got to figure out how to love each other.
Yeah.
So you coming up with these alternative there's this narrative, and I say this, as often as I remember, that black men are not good fathers, and that it was not that was never my reality. It was never reflected in my
right.
reality. But I grew up with this idea that black men were not good fathers because that was a part of the popular narrative.
Right.
And as it turns out, I think it might have been 2014, the CDC did a report, and it turns out that black men are actually the best fathers of all.
Yeah.
Did you read that report? They're most involved. They're most, you know what I mean? Compared to, like, if you're comparing by race. But you take the fact that black men are disproportionately jailed for similar crimes across the board and
Yeah.
given longer sentences, and the whole criminal justice system doesn't do right by black folks. Then you get to you can distort those numbers very easily in your mind. You think, well, all black people are in jail, so they're obviously not at home with their families, and that's just not true either. There's a good amount certainly, but doesn't make us bad fathers. In fact, we're the best of all.
Right. And
So-
and speaking on that too, I've been blessed to intern in some remarkable environments. Sway in the Morning, as well as ABC 7 News. They had a Black public affairs talk show called Here and Now.
Okay.
Originally, it was hosted by Gil Noble.
Okay.
And so when I was an intern there, I believe this was 2014, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And I was, it was myself and another sister who were interns. My senior producer, it was a sister, ironically, who went to the same high school I went to.
Okay.
The assistant producer also was an alumni of my college. Now, this blew my mind. They said as of 2014, I was the most recent male black intern since 96 on their particular show.
Wow.
And I'm from 96 to 2014, they did not have any other male black interns. And so when I got there, I can tell you they fed life into me in ways that I can't even explain, that still resonate with me today. And that's why I've been so focused on wanting to better my relationship, because it was never about, I never saw them in a certain light where it was lesser than or what may have you. It was one of those things where I was in awe. I was just speechless in how they spoke life into me and brought things outside of me that I didn't even know was there. And that's why I want to try to build, better relations with us as a community.
Sure.
So for you, I mean, anyone else in the industry, just from a media standpoint, or anyone else that's been impactful to you, that's helped bring out, awesome characteristics about yourself?
Well, I mentioned Dr. Camilla Westenberg. She's really my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
She literally is my teacher. Like when I was 19, I went to a community college class, and she was the teacher. I was dropping off one of my friends who's walking home to class, and she was there, and she says, "Have you not registered for my African American literature class and my hip hop literature class?"
Right.
And I says, no, ma'am, I have not. I didn't know. And she was like, I expect that you'll be in my class, So I went and got my schedule changed, and I sat in her class. And then after the first semester, she wanted me to, during that class, she wanted me to go to the Black Student Union meetings. And then after that first semester, she wanted me to be the president. And so I ended up becoming the president of the Black Student Union, NAACP
Wow.
Black Student Union, when I was in college. And so she really is the one that kind of, opened my third eye in a manner of speaking, and says, the world is a much bigger place than just you. And then I didn't know it at that time, but, destiny held for me an opportunity to work in mass media for, a decade and a half at this point. Obviously I'm still doing it, but so I never forgot that foundation. And she's been a true ally and a true champion in my life, and someone who's certainly kept me centered. And and there's plenty of other folks as well, but in terms of like the nexus of all of that, she's definitely the one, which is why it's so interesting how that radio station, because they know her too.
Right.
They know exactly who they know exactly what hill I was going to die on. Like I don't know why that was the big deal. That like you guys knew that I'm going to die on this hill.
Yeah,
I'm not a fighter. I'm not one of those people. I don't have that sort of personality or carry that energy. But when it comes to standing with the people, standing with my people, and my people aren't just black people. My people are brown people too.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I
Absolutely.
say that. And the reason I say that is because I'm from California. I grew up around Mexican people.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Arizona. I'm 38 years old. My whole life has been shaped by my children are both half Mexican.
Yeah.
And I mean that's not saying anything, but I'm saying that there's I try to see the best in that relationship with black folks and brown folks, and there's a lot of commonality there. And so when I say my people, I really do mean my people and my people having an equitable experience. But obviously I'm black, so I'm able to speak to those issues a little bit more directly and champion them a little bit better. I don't speak Spanish that well, so I'm not going to be out there like, something
Viva
about
la
the migra and all that
Right.
stuff. I can't, I'd sound a little silly, but I can certainly be in the crowd supporting and waving a flag and just kind of be in there. So
You know what trips me out is that I don't know. It's hard to have to wake up every day and be racist again. Like here's my whole thing. Why is racism so prevalent when some of the best tasting food in the world comes from black and brown people? All right, like I mean, you want to talk about soul food? South. Why everybody loves tacos in Arizona and talks about tacos and tequila, but want to build a wall? And the list goes on, and it brings me to another point that I hold dear to my heart. It's the saying from World War II. It was something to the effect of, when they came for the gypsies, I said nothing. When they came for the next group, I said nothing. Mm-hmm. When they came for me, there was no one left to speak on my behalf.
Wow.
So, and I'm paraphrasing, but I bring that up because it's one of those things where when people, like you mentioned earlier, are neutral or complacent to certain issues, not only is that group that's being marginalized at a disadvantage, but you yourself are disadvantaging yourself because other groups around you who empathize with you are now less likely to want to affiliate because
where were you?
Exactly. Right. So that's why even now when we talk about, dreamers, when we talk about immigration issues, when we talk about these, detainment camps and the hysterectomy, and it blows my mind. Now, as a human, I see that as a major issue, but also my heart goes out, and maybe I feel it because my parents are from Haiti, and I actually grew up, with a very strong Haitian upbringing, so I relate well with immigration. So I say all of that because where do you think people who, I guess, once again, are on the other side of the fence, where do you see that disconnect and that lack of empathy for other people who have issues?
I think that disconnect really comes into play where when people get content.
Yeah.
It's really easy to get comfortable in your own, home, in your own four walls, in your own little suburban utopia, and you effectively distance yourself physically and mentally from the injustices taking place across town.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks, I think that a lot of folks, they have this idea that, well, that's supposed to be happening to them. That's never going to happen to me because it couldn't, because I was born me.
Right.
God made me special because I have a lack of melanin or whatever the case, whatever thing that they may not, consciously tell themselves, but it's just sort of a truth that they live,
Yeah.
I don't think it's meant to be like evil at all. It's just kind of like, well, that's their problems. They'll deal with it. I got my problems and I'll deal with my problems, and so it's very easy to kind of find yourself in that place. And then, sometimes it takes things like what happened with George Floyd, where everyone saw a human being. You know how precious a human life is? Any life, but a human life, that's our brother. We saw that life get snuffed out. He stopped breathing. He was, it was horrible. Yeah. And all the human beings that watched that were able to see a little bit of themselves. Like, is this what death looks like? Is that what's coming for me? Is that what the end looks like? And it was too early for this man. He could have still lived. He could have been alive and whatever, paid a fine for, or I don't even know that he did anything wrong. He's not, they're not trying him, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So, whatever that should have been, I think a lot of folks were able to see it and say, you know what, we have to do something, because they've been saying this since 2012. They've been saying this since the 60s with the Panthers. They've been saying this with the NAACP. They've been saying this since, Jim Crow.
Yeah.
And all these, and with enough information, enough education, and enough different times in history, you're able to kind of tell yourself, like, you know what, maybe there is a problem over there, and maybe they do need our support. And so then you are able to kind of come out of your own four walls in your own utopia, grab a sign, and go stand with your brothers and sisters who may need you.
Yeah. And one of the last points, I want to make too, is that there are so many of us, Black and brown folk, who have been wrongly incarcerated, who have been wrong, too many, that have had so many encounters with the police. And one story that I want to say really cuts me is Khalif Browder. He was a young brother that was coming home from a party, and something happened, and he was arrested and spent, I think, 180 something days in solitary confinement. He was 16 at the time, so essentially he did 3 years in total.
Sure. Yeah.
When he got out, anyone being in solitary confinement may not be the same when they leave. There may be certain mental issues that can develop.
He got abused, and he got beat up a lot too.
He also got abused and beat up, and there's footage of him getting beat up, and it was hard. And what cuts me, when he got out, he enrolled in a community college.
Okay.
And so he went to go write a paper regarding incarceration. And so with talking about the industrial prison complex, he wrote this paper, and he later on ended up taking his life, unfortunately, with some of the demons that he was dealing with. I read the paper that he wrote. It was published in a local article somewhere in New York. And this paper was well written, thorough, thought out, and it just spoke to me. And what hurt me the most was, if he didn't end up in the situation he was in, what kind of man would he be today? Because so many people, like even George Floyd, and the list goes on, whose lives ended prematurely, or whose lives were affected by law enforcement, who would they be? And when you're talking to allies, people who are not Black or brown, what are some ways that they can partake, help push forward the movement?
Well, one of the things you can do is listen to Civic Cypher. It will be starting on Radio Phoenix very soon. I think our start date is October 4th.
Okay.
So you'll be able to catch that show here. But the reason I say that is because I think that by listening to Black conversations, not just Black conversation, not just a conversation you're having with your Black friend, but a conversation that two Black folks might have with each other.
Yeah.
You're able to get nuance, and you're able to get deeper truths, and perhaps maybe even be able to empathize a bit more. And you might encounter some frustration, and I'm sure people are well intentioned. Not everyone is as eloquent as you are. Some people just kind of let it fly, but I think that for the most part, everybody understands that, we all have to do better together.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely is a way, and then there's, when it comes to voting, don't just vote for your own interest, vote for, an agenda that helps everyone. When you're creating a world, make sure that you create a world that helps everyone. There's one of those things that used to happen to me quite a bit when I worked at the Beat for all those years. People would come up to me all the time,
Yeah.
and they would ask, hey, can you help me? I want to do this. I want to try to accomplish my dream. I want to be on the radio, this, that, and the third, right? And my thing is, if you were a woman, if you were a person of color, if you were Nubs.
Yeah.
So he came, and I was like, man, I don't have time to take an intern on or to champion some other person. I'm busy doing me. I got to be on TV today. I got to do a photo shoot for some billboards or whatever.
Right.
I don't have time for this. But if I know you were born with a strike against you, I'm going to make time for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, sometimes the people that would come to me would be straight, Christian, white, healthy males. Yeah?
Mm.
And my charge to them, because I wouldn't say no.
Right.
You know, I mean, they would understand that it would be kind of difficult, but my charge to them would be, okay, I'm going to do this for you, but understand that typically I try to help people who may not be born with as many opportunities or chances as you, or at least if you don't believe that you were born with chances, people that don't have that have more strikes against them. I try to help those people. I try to go where there's the greatest need and invest my time there. And since on the surface I can see that you were born with a good running start in this here life in this
Right.
capitalistic society where the people that control the money and make the decisions look just like you.
Yeah.
I will charge you with one thing if I'm able to if I do help you, and that is that you take the time and empower someone else who doesn't look like you. Make it a 19-year-old mother, Hispanic from South Phoenix that has really no prospects but has a desire. Take the time, work with her. Understand that she's not as sophisticated. You got to take your time with some people. You know what I mean? They doesn't just because they're not refined doesn't mean that they're a lost cause.
Right.
Some people don't. They have to learn it. And if there's a desire to work with her or him or whoever, but make sure you help somebody that doesn't look like you. And in that way, what I will give to you will be like I'm giving it to her and you. And I'm totally okay with that. So I try to create cheerleaders, and I try to create people that will take love and spread that love. And I don't like it to be like as black and white as it sounds, but I do recognize that a lot of times things run along the money line, and the money line runs very closely to the color line. And so a lot of times you just have to call that spade what it is. So
sure.
So that's how I think people can really.
Yeah, and I appreciate your analogy, refined, because some of the most precious gems have some of the more rougher exteriors, but doesn't take away from their value. But Ramses, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with Class Act Radio, radiophoenix.org. Once again, Ramses, what's your social media where people can follow you and stay in touch?
Sure. You can just find me at Ramses Ja, RAMSESJA. It's that way across the board. If you want to Google me, you want to email me or anything, I got a Ramses Ja. There's only one me. And then Civic Cipher, same thing. CivicCipher.com on social media, everything like that. It's just like it sounds, Civic Cipher. And you'll be able to keep up with the show and keep up with me, and hopefully I can count on having your support. Not just your likes and comments, but remember that I'm doing this show for you. So fiscal support is also appreciated. And we'll move forward together, and hopefully we'll see a better world before we lay down for the last time.
Well, most definitely. Well, thank you once again. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Class Act Radio.